All right, so real quick, I want to respond to 2 or 3 comments that was left on my most recent live stream. And as you see in the title, the goal is to help Tariq step his game up. Listen, I understand that he has a strong following and that a lot of his followers are passionate followers. I believe some of them would die, jump in front of a bullet for him. But the fact is, he's just a regular black man. That's it. He's just like any of the rest of us. He's not superhuman. He's not perfect. He's not all-knowing. None of that nonsense. I know, it just seems like a lot of people look at him as if he can never be wrong about something. And that's just nonsense. It's nonsense. What he needs is a team of black men to help keep him on his toes. Not these Keishas that he keep pulling on to the show, sister this and sister that. They are not helping him to step his game up. And man, if you're going to be out here going back and forth with more white supremacists than anybody on the internet, man, you better be on your toes. And notice I didn't say YouTube. He goes back and forth with anybody on the internet, period. And white supremacists, they stay calling up there. Not just white supremacists, but racists who are non-FBA as well, which is basically the offspring of white supremacists. No, you're going to have to be on your toes, man. Now, let's deal with this first response by Quest Kid. He said the thing about white supremacist stats, they weaponize them, omitting major variables. White supremacist numbers are undercounted. These people rig the system, then blame you for falling for the trap. Tariq has addressed the stats. He don't want to waste time on that. He pivots. No. Listen to what you said. Look at what you wrote right here. You said that the white supremacists, their crime numbers are undercounted. And I've heard Tariq go over this before. How, some of these whites who commit crimes will not actually get charged, for the crime. Some of them who commit a homicide won't be charged for it. It'd be some self-defense or whatever. A lot of the, police officers, they're not counted as, red rum. I get that. But that is that's uncertainty. We don't know how often that's happening. You understand? And we can't assume that it happens so often that it shifts the numbers. And why go through all that anyway when we don't commit 60% of crimes? If their crime numbers are undercounted, listen to what you're saying. What does that tell you? So that tells you that despite the fact that they're undercounting white crime, and they still commit more crime, That means it's important to point out the fact that their numbers are higher, because it's not helping them. Them undercounting white crime, it's not even helping them. If, based on the numbers, they still commit more crime. So that sort of exaggerates it even more. Does that make sense? And, it's as simple as this. As soon as she said that we're 13% of the population and commit 60% of the crimes, he should have said, that's a lie. No, we're not. That's a lie. Cite your source. Cite your source. You don't sit there and say, I'm not disagreeing with you. What kind of nonsense is that? That ain't no pivot. That is just not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say that, hey, I don't disagree with you. What? Just because I dealt with statistics on some other live stream and no. Each and every time a white supremacist says that we commit 60% of the crimes, you simply say, that's a lie. What? Does that take too long to say? Is it somehow like not relevant or not important to point out that that's a lie? There's no reason not to call out that lie. That's ridiculous. No. Tariq just need to step his game up and don't ever do that again, period. Tariq, if you're listening, don't do that again. White supremacists come up there and say that we're 13% but commit 60% of the crimes. You flat out tell them that's a lie and ask them to cite their source. All the sources I found indicates that that's a lie. That whites commit the majority of crimes. Crimes, period. And homicide. In most years, they commit more homicides. There's no reason to answer that in any other way. That's retarded. There ain't no reason to be philosophical or sophisticated and say, oh, I agree. Yeah, we commit 60% of the crimes. Yeah, you're right, Becky. I'm not disagreeing with you, Becky. Under no circumstances does that make sense. That is always counterproductive. Now, the other statement, the other comment, he says Tariq has debunked the crime stats plenty of times in the X space and in his broadcast. No. The only thing Tariq did was point out that white crimes are undercounted. We don't know how much they're undercounted. So again, it's uncertainties. It's like taking shots in the dark. Throwing something and hoping that it'll stick. We don't know how often that happens. So that's not really debunking anything. And that is a less relevant point. It's far more important to point out that they actually commit some 60% of crimes. It's if they commit around 60% of the crimes, yet that's what these white supremacists are accusing us of, then there's nothing more important to point out than they are the ones who commit 60% of the crimes, and that is a lie. This idea that we, black Americans, commit 60% of the crimes, that's a lie. Nothing that you can say is more important than saying that right there. That's a lie. You, white supremacists, commit 60% of the crime, and show them the statistics. I've shown them 1,000 times in the past week already. Their crime numbers are higher in almost each and every category. Nothing is more important. Not no stupid lecture about how their crimes are undercounted. That's relevant to point out. Don't get me wrong. But you point that out after you point out that it's a lie. You're lying. You black Americans are 13% of the country, but you commit 60% of the crimes. Stop. You're lying. That's a lie. Cite your source. And on top of that being a lie, and that you actually commit 60% of the crimes, your crimes are undercounted. You see, that's just an add-on. That's not a full debunking. It's not a full debunking saying that their crimes are undercounted. That's just a little icing on the cake. But make no mistake, the cake is that that's a lie. And again, Tariq, stop doing that. That's intellectually lazy, irresponsible, and just goofy to say I'm not disagreeing with you. Basically saying, yeah, you're right, we do commit 60% of the crimes. And the thing is, Tariq is not the first black person I've heard do that. I heard several black people do that, where they just accept these. I'm telling you, these white supremacists don't understand statistics. I don't know why y'all assume that they're so intelligent. They get away with lying because y'all assume that they're so intelligent, that they know what they're talking about. Why does everybody accept this lie that we commit 60% of the crime? That's a lie. What's wrong with people's brains? I just don't get it. None of the crime statistics by reputable sources, none of them have indicated that we commit more crimes. So start pointing that out. Don't point nothing else out. I don't want to hear nothing about no fairy tales, no pot of gold under the rainbow, or no other type of goofiness. Point out that's a lie. It is white America that commits around 60% of crimes. Ask them to cite their source. Then you point out that their crimes are undercounted. Period. Period. Lord. Okay? Look. You know, sometimes I question whether or not Tariq understands the value or the impact of these Twitter spaces he holds. Nobody else's Twitter spaces get that much attention. Nobody else's. And then he uploads them to YouTube, and those get tens of thousands of views. Literally, nobody's Twitter spaces get that many ears. If your Twitter space is that popular and you're a black man and you going back and forth with white supremacists, I'm going to be listening. And if you make some mistakes, I'm going to be one of those voices that pointed out, I don't care who you are. And I'll leave it there.